He worked 16 hours a day as a delivery driver just to pay for his daughter's incurable medical bills. But just when he thought he'd reached his breaking point, a strike of lightning sent them both plummeting into a world infested with demons. Now, this single father isn't just fighting poverty, he's fighting monsters to keep his terminal daughter alive in a world she was never supposed to survive. This is the story of Junho, a single father navigating the tough waters of life. After his wife walked out on him right after their daughter was born, he found himself alone in the daunting task of raising her. Working as a delivery driver, life has thrown him some serious curveballs. To add to his struggles, his daughter was born with a rare condition that affects the entire left side of her body, making her movements reminiscent of an elderly person. When the doctors delivered the heartbreaking news that there was no cure, Junho felt utterly crushed, but for the sake of his little girl, he resolved to give it his all. He works tirelessly, often skipping sleep, pouring every penny he earns into hospital bills just to keep her alive. Junho puts in over 16 hours a day, and somehow he still manages to care for his daughter. During the day, he delivers packages while she sleeps, and at night he brings her along in his truck. This relentless routine has left him utterly drained. His daughter sometimes cries through the night, and Junho feels helpless. He's become pale and weary, carrying her with everywhere, while her condition continues to deteriorate. One day, as he finishes up work, Junho is a bundle of nerves, anxiously checking his watch as the elevator descends. Even when his colleagues try to engage him in conversation, he brushes them off, rushing out the door and sprinting toward his truck. His coworkers are puzzled by his frantic behavior, but one of them suggests that Junho is likely overwhelmed, and honestly, they might just be right. As he raced toward his truck, we discover that Junho's wife had left him right after giving birth. There's some uncertainty among people about whether she truly abandoned him and their daughter, or if she simply vanished, as no one seems to know her whereabouts. We also learn that she was quite charming and had once been a novelist. Regardless, Junho found himself alone, trying to balance a job that barely paid while caring for his little girl. In that moment, he hurriedly rushed his baby to the hospital. Junho desperately inquired about treatment options, only to be crushed when the doctor informed him that there was no cure. Struggling to process this devastating news, he gazed into his daughter's eyes as she reached out to him with innocent playfulness. This is what drives Junho to work tirelessly to the point of exhaustion, sacrificing sleep and spending hundreds of dollars each month just to cover hospital bills to keep his daughter stable. Every penny he earns goes straight to those expenses. Our main character is essentially juggling fatherhood and work. During the day, he delivers packages, and at night, he brings his daughter along for the ride in his truck. It's grueling to the extent that even some of his colleagues admit that if they were in his shoes, they might have considered ending it all. One night, after a long day, Junho finally makes it home, completely drained. Just as he's about to catch a few precious moments of sleep, his daughter wakes up. The stress builds to a breaking point, and in a moment of frustration, he loses his cool and yells at the poor little one, saying life would be easier if she weren't around. Even though he didn't mean it, the words hit hard, leaving his daughter wide-eyed and tearful, as if she understood the weight of his statement. Realizing the impact of his words, Junho quickly apologizes, his heart heavy with regret. But that's not the end of his struggles. Junho is also facing a diagnosis of stomach cancer, which feels like the final blow. This is the moment everything comes crashing down for him. He starts to reflect on where it all went wrong, wondering if it all began when he was still with his wife. Their daughter was born with health issues, and shortly after, his wife vanished without a trace. He spent countless days in the pouring rain handing out flyers in a desperate search for her. The sudden disappearance left him bewildered, and eventually he lost all hope. There he stood, drenched in the rain, cradling his little girl as she coughed and cried, reaching out for him. We finally witnessed Junho on the brink of doing something unimaginable. He stands at the edge of a building, seemingly ready to end it all, but just as he's about to take that drastic step, he snaps back to reality, hearing his little girl calling out to him. She's struggling to breathe, clearly running a fever, and reaches out for her father's hand, as if pleading for his help. In that moment, Junho realizes the gravity of what he was about to do. He pulls her into a tight embrace, apologizing for frightening her. Tears stream down his face as the weight of his near decision crashes down on him, and we finally learn his little girl's name as she calls out Young. After a moment, he decides to take her back inside to protect her from the rain and the cold, but just when it seems like things couldn't get worse, a bolt of lightning strikes nearby, causing Junho to lose his balance. With him standing at the edge of a tall building, they both tumble over. As they fall, Junho reaches out desperately for her, calling her name, but it feels like nothing can save them. Suddenly, he crashes into a strange dimension, still plummeting as monstrous figures loom above him. Junho reached out to his little girl one last time, but nothing happened. Before he knew it, he was floating in a dark, empty void. He mentioned that it had been so long that he couldn't even tell how much time had passed. What he did know was that he had been adrift for at least 10 days in this endless emptiness. In those first few days, he screamed his daughter's name like a madman, crying until he collapsed, only to wake up and cry again. As time dragged on, exhaustion took over, and he lost all sense of reality, but eventually he started to drift out of the void. Below him, he spotted another world. There was a massive fortress wall, a dark forest, and a slum district. These were places he had never visited or seen before, yet just one glance at the landscape felt oddly familiar. This was Saini, the world from the novel his wife had written. Out of nowhere, Junho began to hear a booming voice echoing in his mind. It spoke in a language he couldn't comprehend, and as he cried out in pain, covering his ears with his hands, the voice only grew louder, causing him to black out as blood trickled from his nose. Flashes of memories from his time in the void surged through his mind, revealing his daughter being taken by a mysterious monster. He reached out for her, but it was just a memory, leaving him in anguish over the loss of his little girl. He called her name, desperately pleading for her to return, but in that moment he heard his wife's voice telling him he was never meant to come to this world, leaving Junho utterly stunned. Before he could wrap his head around what was happening, he started to fall back down. As he plummeted, Junho realized that if this truly was the world from his wife's novel, then he had essentially fallen into hell, because this place was crawling with some seriously terrifying monsters, which makes me wonder just what kind of inspiration his wife had when writing such a story. Meanwhile, in the fortress city of this world, a group of warriors was locked in a fierce battle against a horde of monsters. One warrior armed with a sword and shield managed to take down one of the creatures, but it wasn't enough to turn the tide. The remaining monsters lunged at him, and just as he braced himself to defend, one of the beasts was shot out of the air, splattering its blood all over the warrior's face. As he wiped the gore away, he turned to his companion, questioning her actions. That's when we see the culprit, a pale woman with long, elf-like ears. Yep, she's definitely an elf. The elf tells the warrior, whom she calls Garf, that having her by his side gives him strength in moments like this. But then she casually tells him to take care of the rest of the monsters on his own, which annoys Garf. He protests, asking if she really thinks that's even possible. Just then, something catches their eye. They turn to see a massive blue light streaking down from the sky. As they look up, confusion washes over them. But the light picks up speed and crashes into the ground, causing a huge explosion that forces Garf and the elf to shield their faces. It turns out that Junho was inside that blue light, and he hit the ground so hard that he crashed right through the roof of a nearby house. The elf stands there stunned to see someone emerging from the wreckage, but there's no time to be amazed. Monsters are charging toward them in droves. To the elf's disbelief, all the creatures are heading straight for Junho, who is equally taken aback, crying out and covering his face. Garf steps up, swinging his sword and sending several monsters flying with a single blow. He starts cursing at Junho, assuming he's some sort of civil servant, and tells him to get out of there. Meanwhile, Junho recognizes Garf immediately. He's one of the main characters from his wife's novel. In his typical clueless fashion, Junho asks Garf where his master Lucy is and why he's alone, leaving Garf utterly stunned. This was personal information he never expected anyone to know. Just as he's distracted, a monster leaps at him, but he manages to block it with his shield just in time, effortlessly dispatching it with an upward slash. Garf quickly turns back to Junho, demanding to know how he knows about his master, but then Junho hears a little girl crying. He spins around to find it's just a child nearby with her mother. Seeing the fear in the mother's eyes as she clutches her child and pleads for help, Garf can't help but feel overwhelmed. With a sigh of determination, he rips off his armor and yells at the monsters to come at him, vowing to take them down one by one. His hands morph into claws, ready for battle. As Junho watches this unfold, he can't shake the feeling that this scene feels eerily familiar. The monsters charge at Garf, who starts throwing punches while Junho is still trying to wrap his head around everything. Amidst the chaos, he sees the civilians crying and panicking, and hears Lucy calling out to Garf, asking if she's still around. Garf warns Lucy to stay back, fearing they'll be surrounded. Lucy responds that she'll try to lure some of the monsters away from him, and that's when it hits Junho. Those were the exact words Lucy spoke in the novel before she died in Garf's arms. He realizes this is the prologue of the story. Determined not to let history repeat itself, Junho takes off his shirt, leaving Garf puzzled about what he's up to. Junho declares he needs to find his daughter and save Garf's master in the process. And let's take a moment to appreciate our main character Junho, who has a dad bod instead of some unrealistic six-pack. Finally a relatable story, but don't get it twisted, our guy is about to unleash some serious action. Alright, let's keep going. We flash back to a moment when Junho was engrossed in a novel his wife was writing. He couldn't help but shed tears over how tragically pitiful Garf's character was. Garf's journey was quite straightforward. He became a monster hunter and finally found a mentor he could rely on, only to have that mentor die right at the beginning of the story. It was truly heartbreaking, but Junho's wife just smiled, saying she couldn't change the plot since the novel was already serialized and out there. The story was still unfolding when his wife mysteriously vanished. Now, back to the action. Lush was sprinting, using a creepy whistle to lure all the monsters away from Garf. She mentioned that she bought the whistle just in case, and now she was really glad she did. But as she turned around, she sensed something was off. All the monsters were on their knees, almost as if they were bowing to a supreme ruler. It hit Lush hard, and the realization was so intense that she couldn't help but smile. Meanwhile, Garf was keeping pace with Junho as he dashed toward their destination. Garf couldn't help but think about how he was following our main character without a second thought. He questioned whether he could truly trust him. At least it seemed like Garf Guy wasn't one of the prisoners, and since he knew both Garf's name and his master's, Garf decided to stick with him for now. But he made a mental note: if our MC pulled any funny business or if anything felt off, he wouldn't hesitate to take him out. Soon enough, they reached the spot where Lucy is, and without missing a beat, Lucy urges Garf to get out of there. Garf, still trying to wrap his head around the situation, is confused about what Lucy means. Just then, a colossal monster slams its hands together like it's applauding, and a terrifying yet awe-inspiring creature looms right above Lucy. This demon has a sinister hand posture, almost like a twisted version of the infected from The Last of Us. As if on cue, the monster starts counting, and with just the first number, everyone who dares to look at it begins to bleed from every orifice. Meanwhile, Junho finally makes it to the scene, panting and worn out from his sprint. He fears he might be too late, and in that moment the harsh reality hits him. He really is late to save everyone. When the monster reaches the count of 2, strange purple roots or hands start emerging from the bodies of those who were staring at it, including Lucia, who is already collapsed. Garf rushes to her side, noticing that Lucia seems to be in better shape than the others. The purple roots are mostly sprouting from her body, not her head or mouth like the rest. This realization hits Junho hard. Everything is unfolding just like it did in the novel. Garf desperately tries to save Lucia, shouting for her to hang in there, but she's in so much agony that words escape her. All she can think about is how terrified she is of dying, and how she regrets bringing Garf to this dreadful place. She reaches out her hand, offering an apology, but as the scene escalates, the menacing monster prepares for one final count and clap. This creature is pure evil, just look at that wicked grin. As it counts to 3 and claps its hands, Junho rushes to Lucy, quickly covering her eyes with a cloth. In a shocking twist, everyone else around them transforms into plants, dying instantly as grotesque flowers sprout from their bodies. Garf stands in stunned silence, realizing Lucy is the only one who remains unchanged. Our muscular dad bod hero warns Garf never to make eye contact with that creature. He explains that the monster's powers come with a catch. If someone looks it in the eye and it claps 3 times, they're done for. Junho, determined to find his daughter, clenches his fists and faces the monster. He recalls seeing that monstrous hand before. It was the same one that snatched his little girl away. He boldly demands to know if the monster has his daughter, and the creature responds with the most twisted smile he's ever seen. As it calls out his daughter's name, it cruelly spits her into its enormous hand, making her look like a tiny acorn in comparison. With that sadistic grin, as if ready to devour the innocent child, Junho is consumed by rage. Suddenly, Garfa delivers a powerful punch to the monster's face, catching even Junho off guard. The massive beast howls in pain and flings poor Ah-young into the air, sending Junho into a panic. Miraculously, she lands safely in the arms of a random woman. The woman quickly wraps her in a blanket, but her relief is short-lived as the monster charges at her, claiming Ah-young as her daughter. This creature is so fixated on the child that it believes she belongs to it. The significance of this will become clear once the lore unfolds. Naturally, Garf isn't about to let the monster have a moment's peace. He swiftly delivers a powerful claw punch to its face. With Garf staring it down, the monster decides it's time to deal with this pesky human first. As they lock eyes, it prepares to unleash its clap ability, but just as Garf shut his eyes, it hit him that the monster was just toying with him. With a brutal punch to the face, it sent him flying, crashing hard into the ground. The impact was nothing short of savage, making Garf cry out in agony. The monster taunted him, claiming that Junho's little girl was its daughter, and it yanked Garf closer, repeating that creepy line over and over. It locked eyes with Garf, calling out Junho's daughter's name and insisting she belonged to it. That's when we finally got a good look at this beast. It had a centaur-like body, but in a nightmarish way. Junho recalled that this monster's weak spot was its tail. To his surprise, he spotted a small fox-like creature nestled within it, which seemed to be its true form. Before Junho could act, the monster's main body caught sight of him. As it growled, Junho hefted a massive rock. I have to say he looked pretty impressive, but just as he swung to crush the monster, it dodged his attack with surprising agility. In that moment, Junho realized he was in deep trouble. A powerful kick sent him flying, and just imagining being kicked by such a colossal creature was mind-boggling. On the upside, the monster was left reeling, confused about how Junho had pinpointed its main body. Garf quickly picked up on this and figured that based on the monster's reaction, it must have a weakness. Being part monster himself, Garf had some serious skills. He broke free from the monster's grip and landed a stunning knee strike to its jaw. But instead of the expected result, it only fueled the monster's rage. Any attacks that don't target its main body are practically useless. As the monster gets ready to swallow Gareth whole, he just grins and tells it that it's already lost. In the blink of an eye, he strikes a devastating blow to the monster's front legs, knocking it off balance. He then yells at our main character to deliver the finishing move. Witnessing this, our ultimate dad finally taps into his power. This is a classic dad moment. He crushes the monster's main body with a boulder, again and again. Not just this monster, but all the creatures nearby feel the impact. We watch as the monster's main body starts to dissolve, its eyes wide with shock and disbelief, while Junho glares at it with pure hatred, warning it never to utter his daughter's name with that filthy mouth. The monster completely disintegrates, leaving Junho standing there. Suddenly, Junho realizes that the monster's main body isn't dead yet. It starts laughing, catching him off guard. When he asks what's so funny, the monster twists its expression even more and reveals that it knows Junho's secret, that he tried to kill his daughter. It laughs maniacally, repeating this phrase like a chant, burrowing into Junho's mind, and he knows deep down that the monster is right. He did attempt to kill his daughter. Before the monster can dig any deeper, Lucy takes action and blows its head off with her gun, leaving Junho in shock. With the monster gone, all the roots that had been creeping over Lucy's body disappear, and she insists that everything the monster said is a lie. Suddenly, Junho hears his little girl crying and rushes to check on her. What follows is a scene that feels like it's ripped straight from Attack on Titan, reminiscent of the child during the rumbling. Baby Ah Young is being passed around among the crowd. It's a beautiful moment, with the area darkened to emphasize the baby. As she's handed from person to person, they say a prayer, invoking the parent god to watch over all parents, reminding that every child carries their image, and may Lady Miriam's blessing guide them both. It's not confirmed yet, but I have a hunch that Junho's wife might be named Miriam, and for some reason I feel like when she vanished, she ended up in this world. But enough with the theories. Finally, Junho gets his daughter back. He's a bit puzzled by the chant the crowd is reciting, but that's not what matters right now. As he looks at his little girl, he notices that the condition she was born with has completely vanished. The half of her body that used to resemble that of an old woman is gone. What's even more heartwarming is that she recognizes her father, playfully grasping his fingers. Junho, taken aback by this miracle, gently touches her face where a huge scar used to be, only to find it has disappeared. Witnessing this touching moment, Lucy quickly asks if this is the daughter Junho has been searching for. So desperately, overcome with emotion, Junho bursts into tears, confirming that this is indeed his little girl. He pulls her close, apologizing for leaving her all alone, saying, "Daddy is so sorry." Lucy and Garf, who are now feeling better, can't help but watch as Junho continues to cry, thanking the gods or whatever higher power it was for healing his daughter. He even wonders if perhaps his own cancer might be cured too. Before he can express his gratitude to Garf and Luce, he suddenly collapses, which is totally understandable given the adrenaline rush he's been riding. Luce and Garf exchange speechless glances, but they ultimately decide to take Junho back with them. There's also the issue of payment to consider. As adventurers, Luce and Garf rely on monster hunting for their income, and since Junho played a significant role in the situation, they agree that he should get his fair share. As Junho drifts into unconsciousness, he tells Luce that he'll be a great asset to them if they let him join. Luce uses her abilities to ensure he's being truthful. Just as Junho passes out, we get a sweet moment of his daughter playing with his unconscious body. The prologue of the novel, which is meant to showcase the protagonist's challenges, takes an unexpected turn thanks to our main character Junho. This twist alters the course of the story, leaving him uncertain about what lies ahead. In a rundown city where a river clearly separates the wealthy from the impoverished, we learn that Junho has been navigating this new world for a few weeks now. In that time, he's managed to open a restaurant. Well, more of a pub really, but it's become so popular that it's often packed with monster hunters savoring his delicious dishes. Garf has been working as his waiter, and we find him yelling at Junho to speed up the food prep since the customers are getting restless. Junho, now looking like a seasoned chef, is hard at work in the kitchen. He reminisces about the day he woke up to find Lucy handing him his reward for slaying the monster and saving her life. We discover that Lucy is actually a magician, which earned her a little extra on top of that. It was during this time that Junho boldly pitched a business idea to them. His concept was straightforward. He suggested they pool all the silver coins they had earned and hand them over to him. Garf and Lasha were puzzled, but Junho clarified that as monster hunters their income was pretty unpredictable, only coming in when monsters were around. On top of that, monster hunting was seen as a cursed profession in this world. They faced double the usual fees for nearly everything in the city compared to regular folks. Most inns and restaurants wouldn't even serve hunters. Essentially, becoming a monster hunter meant you were treated like half a monster yourself, and people were often fearful, worried that they might turn into monsters at any moment. When Lucy heard this, she got really annoyed and asked Junho what all of this had to do with him wanting their money. Junho explained that he wanted to open a restaurant where monster hunters could eat and relax without feeling judged. Garf shouted at Junho, calling the idea ridiculous, but Lucy interrupted him, admitting that it did sound pretty far-fetched. However, using her ability to detect lies, she confirmed that Junho was being honest and wasn't lying about anything. So they decided to hand over all their money, and a few weeks later Junho successfully opened the restaurant. The restaurant's main dish was ramen, and the locals absolutely loved it. They kept asking Junho where he learned to cook so well, which took him by surprise. He even wondered if people thought he was some kind of chef from a noble family in the western region. Of course, he couldn't tell them that his ramen recipe was just a haphazard one he picked up from YouTube, which is basically the YouTube of this world. Anyway, Luxie finally stumbles in looking completely tipsy, which is just the worst since she was supposed to be keeping an eye on little Ah Young while our main character was busy in the kitchen. Junho gives her a stern warning, reminding her that drinking while babysitting is totally unacceptable, especially since he's actually paying her to look after the little girl. He even mentions that this month alone, this adorable elf has downed 2 whole barrels of alcohol, which has driven up the beer prices. Luxie, in her drunken state, just nods and says she gets it, but then she quickly turns the tables on Junho, insisting that if he tells her one thing, she'll promise to stop drinking while watching baby Ah Young. When Junho asks what she wants to know, she locks her gaze on him and demands to know how he always seems to know where the monsters will pop up. The truth is, Junho has been using his knowledge from the novel to figure out where the monsters in this world will show up and send in some monster hunters to deal with them. Naturally, he can't spill the beans, so he dodges the question, saying it's complicated. With a reassuring smile, he tells Lucy it's nothing dangerous and that it won't put Garf in harm's way. With her keen instincts, Lucy confirms that he's telling the truth. Since he didn't answer her question, she goes back to her drinking. Honestly, I'm not sure what the artist is trying to convey, but it's really tough to pin down Lucy's gender. Sometimes she comes off as cute, other times she seems more masculine, but that's not the main point. We then see that Junho has essentially created a map by marking where the monsters are likely to appear. For a fleeting moment, he finds himself pondering how he ended up in this bizarre situation. There are still some mysteries he can't quite wrap his head around, like why his daughter's illness seemed to vanish the moment they stepped into this world. One thing he's certain of, though, is that he's determined to rewrite the ending of this tale. Given his knowledge of how things played out in the novel, he feels he has no other option. He goes on to explain that in the original story there are roughly 4 key locations where the monsters show up. The fortress wall isn't a priority right now since it only comes into play at the very end, making it pretty much irrelevant for the time being. Then there's the Dark Forest, the site of a massive war against monsters that erupted long before the wall was ever constructed. He mentions that a few people still inhabit that area, but it's plagued by monsters and strange occurrences. There are some ghostly or skeletal creatures lurking about, but thankfully not in overwhelming numbers. Junho figures that his biggest worry lies in the slums and the middle-class neighborhoods. Even though these areas are within the wall, monsters tend to pop up there with alarming frequency. If he wants to prevent the onslaught of monsters and rally some capable monster hunters, his restaurant is the ideal spot for that. Essentially, the novel this world is based on resembles the Berserk manga, and if you've read the manga or seen the anime, you know those stories don't hold back even for the main character. So to safeguard his little girl, Junho is doing everything he can to set things right. Fortunately for him, thanks to Lu Sha's knack for sniffing out lies, they've managed to win over the trust of the people, which is honestly pretty amusing, since everyone believes Lu Sha wholeheartedly. If she claims our guy isn't lying even when he is, everyone takes her word for it. That's exactly what happened, and now Junho is seen as this oddly knowledgeable guy who's got a lot of insights about monsters, but poses no threat at all. As time went on, he started sharing snippets of information about the monsters and pivotal events from the original story, and he, Garf, and Lucy essentially formed a sort of guild. Monster hunters would swing by his restaurant to grab a bite, and he'd dish out valuable intel about the creatures. Plus, with his expertise, Garf and Lucy raked in some serious cash which they funneled back into the restaurant, making them feel like one big happy family. Junho points out that the real issue lies in the ending, which claims that everything goes downhill. To make matters worse, this ending is set to unfold exactly 2 years from now. The novel never really explains why, but it does say that in just 2 years, everything will have already crumbled. Junho is determined to change that, especially since his little girl just started feeling better. He won't let that ending come to pass. Meanwhile, back at the restaurant, Garf shouts for him, saying they've got a situation. 6 new customers have arrived, each ordering something different. Naturally, Junho didn't catch any of this. He was still deep in thought, trying to figure out how to stop the world from falling apart. Meanwhile, little Ah Young was blissfully napping while her dad was internally freaking out, realizing that his restaurant is thriving but he only has 2 years to savor this success. It's ironic considering how hard he fought in the real world. He finally makes his way over to the customers who just placed their order, but he has to break the news that they've come at a bad time. His restaurant is basically closed for the day and has run out of stock. This leaves some of the monster hunters feeling a bit down. A few of them mention how they never imagined they'd see their favorite spot shut down due to a lack of food, while others chime in that Junho's place only uses fresh ingredients, so it's understandable. They even go on to say it's way better than that slop shop up the hill. As they walk away, Junho can't help but wonder why his restaurant is thriving. The tipsy Lu Sha points out the obvious. She explains that since Junho serves food and drinks to monster hunters like them, who are pretty much banned from other eateries, and he doesn't kick them out when they linger too long, plus he doesn't overcharge and even offers them extra drinks, it's no surprise they love his place. Anyway, Garf pulls the already tipsy Lucy away, but just as he does, she suddenly gets serious, as if she senses something off inside the restaurant. When Garf asks her what's up, she brushes it off and waves goodbye to Ah Young, slipping back into her goofy self. But then, getting serious again, she tells Junho she'll see him soon, leaving him puzzled about what she means. Ah Young just waves back, looking adorable as ever. As Junho heads back inside, he notices a creepy guy still hanging out by the door, seemingly waiting for him. That unsettling bastard is just sitting there looking like he's up to no good regarding our little girl Ah Young. As Junho finally spots the creepy guy, he tells him that the restaurant is closed for the day, but instead of leaving, the guy just grins in that unsettling way, saying he knows. Junho, feeling a chill run down his spine, heads toward the back, leaving the creepy dude standing there like he just stepped out of a horror flick. Junho asks if the guy came to grab a bite, and the guy responds that he heard this place is quite famous. Curious, Junho asks what he means by famous and what exactly this little restaurant is known for. The creepy guy just smirks and says it's famous for serving food to monster hunters. Then he bursts into a maniacal laugh, questioning why Junho would even think about serving those monster hunters, which is pretty wild. You see, monster hunters are part monster themselves, so they're seen as monsters too. If they lose control of their emotions, they can turn into full-blown monsters. Anyway, our main character, sensing something is off with this guy, just gives an awkward smile and asks if there's a problem with him serving food to monster hunters. The creepy guy keeps laughing, saying that monster hunters are just freaks who are half monster and never fully transform. He adds that it's only a matter of time before they do, and honestly, he's not wrong. There have been plenty of cases where monster hunters have completely turned into monsters and started wreaking havoc, so for someone to not only welcome these folks but also feed them, especially with a little kid like Ah Young around, is downright insane. Hearing all this, our main character just gives an awkward smile and quickly shifts the conversation. The creepy guy insists that wasn't even the reason for his visit. He asks our MC if he owns the restaurant, and with an even creepier grin he mentions that he's heard the owner knows a lot about monsters, which leaves Junho completely stunned. He tries to downplay it, saying those are just rumors and that he's really just a humble cook, but the guy calls him out directly, claiming that what he just said is total nonsense. That's when it finally clicks for Junho. He starts to wonder if this creepy guy might actually be a monster in disguise. Junho explains that there are basically 3 types of monsters in this story. First up are the beast-type monsters. They're the most common, usually not very bright, and pop up frequently throughout the story. You know, your classic monsters. Next are the spell-type monsters, like the one we saw at the beginning. These guys wield some terrifying magic and are smarter than the beast types, but thankfully they only show up once or in special situations, which is a relief because they're no joke. Junho figures that those 2 types of monsters attack humans on sight, so there's no way this creepy dude is one of them. That leaves only the 3rd type, and the worst of the bunch, the named monsters. These are the ones that are directly or indirectly linked to the main story, and just thinking about them makes Junho break out in a cold sweat before he can even process it. The creepy guy is right next to him, asking what he's searching for. Essentially, this guy is trying to provoke a reaction from our MC Junho. He's been throwing words at him, but Junho just brushes them off politely. He tells the guy he's looking for some leftover ingredients to whip up a meal, but the guy just keeps that creepy grin and says he doesn't like human food. That's when Junho finally comes to terms with it. This guy is a real monster, and he's not even trying to hide it, but with little Ah Hyung there, he knows he can't do anything reckless. As he gets ready to set Ah Hyung down to deal with the situation, the monster locks eyes with them. For some strange reason, these monsters have this bizarre ability to sense a person's deepest, darkest secrets. It bluntly asks Junho if he's abused his little girl, even adding that while he didn't hit her, he tried to kill her. Hearing this, Junho erupts with pure rage, which is exactly what the monster was hoping for. It keeps pushing his buttons, taunting him to speak up and defend himself. Junho snaps back, telling it to shut up, which makes the monster giddy. Finally, Junho is talking back. Realizing he's made a mistake, Junho takes a breath and calls the monster out, pointing out that it's been using its silver tongue to provoke him all along. This leaves the monster utterly stunned. To actually attack and devour a human, it needs to push its victims to the brink. But now that Junho has called it out on something he shouldn't even know, it lunges at him. Junho, already expecting this, quickly sets little Ah Young aside and grabs a knife. But before he can strike, the monster seizes him by the throat and slams him against the wall. As it opens its mouth, we catch a glimpse of the monster's true form, a tiny creepy creature inside. It asks Junho how he figured out its game. Initially, it thought the restaurant owner, who everyone insists is a monster expert, was just some guy who dedicated his life to studying these creatures out of a desire for revenge after losing his family. But it turns out there's more to the story. What's really going on is that this monster is genuinely taken aback. This is a creature that was only supposed to show up once in the novel, and it was so elusive that there was zero information about it. So for some random guy in a restaurant to not only know how its powers work is pretty dangerous. Then it tells Junho that it plans to kill him and eat his baby, which sends Junho into a rage. He grabs the knife in his hand and slashes at the monster's hand with brutal force, but it doesn't faze the creature at all. Just like the monster from the beginning, unless you hit its main body, none of the other attacks will do anything. Junho reminds himself of this monster's ability, which is actually a good thing, since most monsters in this world have some kind of limitation on their powers. Finally, he remembers and decides to turn the tables on this monster. He starts taunting it, outright mocking it by calling it a parasite, which leaves the monster stunned. Junho keeps going, pointing out that these monsters are essentially parasites that will do anything to survive, which isn't entirely off base since they need human bodies to live. This really gets to the monster, and as it lunges to attack Junho, a barrier stops it in its tracks. Junho explains that this monster's whole ability revolves around provoking its prey, but if the prey manages to flip the script and get it riled up, it loses the ability to even touch them, and it has to start provoking them all over again. This only makes the monster angrier as it rants about wasting too much time talking to someone, as unpredictable as our main character. It tries to get under Junho's skin by threatening to toss his daughter high up, just like he attempted to do by throwing her from a skyscraper. But our MC remains unfazed. Junho flashes a menacing smile and retorts that he shouldn't care about the words of a monster that's about to meet its end. The monster, taken aback, laughs and questions how a weak human like him could possibly kill it. Junho simply warns it not to fret since it has already wasted enough time chatting. Its demise is pretty much a done deal. That's when the most powerful character in the novel finally makes his grand entrance, a swordsman dressed in black. It looks like Junho was counting on this moment. Even the creepy monster is taken aback when it spots the swordsman dressed in black. Junho, who had anticipated this moment, simply tells the swordsman that if he's on the hunt for a monster, he's definitely in the right place. In the blink of an eye, the monster's hand goes flying. Not just the hand of its human host, but even the arm of its true form is severed in one swift motion. The monster is left utterly shocked, while the swordsman remains calm and collected. Thanks to the monster's limitations, which prevent it from attacking anyone who has already provoked it, the creature tries to get under his skin instead. It mocks the swordsman, questioning how he can sever hands without even introducing himself. But before it can finish its taunt, its other hand is sent flying, plunging the monster into sheer terror. In a panic, the creature abandons its human host and drops to the floor, desperately trying to escape with its true body, yet the swordsman doesn't even glance at the real form. Instead, he casually slices off the legs of the human host, and at that very moment, the monster loses both of its legs in its true form as well. This reveals the swordsman's terrifying ability. By attacking the host, he can directly harm the monster's real body. It's something Junho himself couldn't manage earlier. Without uttering a single word, the swordsman plunges his blade straight into the human host's chest, a move that strikingly reflects the damage done to the monster's true form. It's clear the artist wanted to showcase this panel, and honestly, it's stunning. Finally, the monster acknowledges him, crying out his name, Balder, the Source Slayer. In a fit of desperation, it lashes out, calling him a hunting dog who failed to protect his master, labeling him as cursed, heartless, and unlikable. Balder remains silent. With one swift, ruthless slash, he puts an end to the monster, leaving it in utter disbelief as its body starts to disintegrate. Nearby, Junho watches in horror, shaken by the sheer brutality of Balder's actions. He exhales a sigh of relief, but that relief is short-lived. Balder suddenly aims his sword right at him. Balder demands to know what's going on with Junho. He explains that he's been hunting this monster for years, and throughout that time it never once revealed itself to anyone, so why would it suddenly show up for some random guy? Even Junho admits it's odd. He explains that this particular monster was supposed to make its appearance halfway through the story, where it would start tormenting the protagonist Garth. Junho tells Balder that the creature has been tormenting people for years, and there's no special reason it chose to appear to him. With a monster hunter like Balder arriving just in time, the threat was neutralized. That's when Junho realizes he's made a grave mistake. He just called Balder by name. Balder freezes in shock, having never revealed his identity. In an instant, Balder raises his sword, ready to take Junho down with a single blow. Junho instinctively puts his hands up to defend himself, but before anything can go down, Garth and Lucia suddenly show up, stepping in to protect Junho. Turns out these two were just hanging out by the door the whole time. Lucia warns Balder to lower his sword unless he wants a big bullet hole in his head. She questions if he's lost his mind attacking a human out of the blue like that. Balder argues that Junho knows way too much about monsters and about him, which makes him really suspicious. Lucy shoots back, saying that Junho is just a regular guy who happens to know a lot about monsters and isn't a threat at all. When Balder asks if she really thinks he'll buy that, Lucy explains that with her 4 eyes she can tell when someone's lying, and Junho isn't lying. She adds that the one who's truly suspicious is Balder himself. Balder silently sizes them up. He starts with Garth, pointing out that he's only been a hunter for less than 5 years. Then he turns to Junho, calling him suspicious for opening a restaurant just for monster hunters. Finally, he looks at Lucy, dismissing her as just a pointy-eared kid who even ate her own brother. This actually gives some insight into her nature. I might have been wrong earlier to label Lucy as an elf. In fact, elves might not even exist in this world, and her pointed ears could just be a trait from her monster heritage. Balder keeps going, deliberately trying to get under her skin, asking if she still refuses to eat meat. Lucy snaps and immediately takes a shot at him, but Balder effortlessly dodges and lands a brutal punch to her stomach, sending her flying. Garf rushes in to attack, but Balder blocks his weak sword strike, snapping the blade in two before Garf can even react. Balder drives a vicious knee into his face, sending him crashing across the room. In just a few seconds, Balder completely wipes the floor with his opponents. He then shifts his focus back to our main character Junho, who realizes he's in deep trouble. As Balder lunges forward to take him down, his arm suddenly explodes, blown apart by a high-speed bullet. In an instant, his hand is severed, leaving him frozen in shock. Even Junho can't believe his eyes as Balder's arm thuds to the ground. Staring at his mangled limb, Balder attempts to grab his sword with his remaining hand, but Lucia has already recovered and stops him. She bluntly questions whether he really thinks he can take them all on by himself. Balder hesitates, following the bullet's trajectory with his gaze. Just as he's about to react, baby Ah Young starts crying, pulling everyone's attention. Junho rushes to her side, gently asking if she was scared by all the chaos. As Ah Young continues to cry, Balder is momentarily taken aback. Realizing he didn't know Junho had a daughter, he retrieves his sword and to everyone's astonishment, his arm has already fully regenerated as if nothing ever happened. Without saying another word, he turns and walks away. Before Balder can completely leave, Junho calls out to him. He admits that he probably came off as extremely suspicious and understands why Balder attacked him. He adds that their first meeting was a total disaster, but if Balder ever has some free time, he should swing by as a customer. Balder pauses for a moment, then departs, telling Junho that may Lady Miriam bless his path. Back inside, Junho and Lucia both let out exhausted sighs and collapse onto the ground. Lucia playfully complains that Junho should really ban that guy from the restaurant, wondering if he's being too reckless and too nice considering Balder literally tried to kill him. Junho simply replies that he trusts him. Lucia asks if that means he trusts them the same way, and he confirms it. Out of nowhere, Garf, who had been knocked out by Balder, suddenly comes to, shouting and throwing his fist in the air like he's ready to take on the world again. Junho and Lucia, who are just a few feet away, can't help but stare at him in disbelief, wondering what on earth this guy is up to. They burst into laughter, cracking jokes about Garf's ridiculous pose. After a moment, Junho grabs a small board and starts scribbling something down. When Lucia asks what he's up to, Junho casually replies that he's just saying hello to a future customer. He positions himself in front of his shop and holds up the sign which simply reads, "Thank you." Meanwhile, the sniper who had saved him earlier spots this through her scope, and she's instantly hit with a wave of emotion. Looking through her gun again, she sees Junho waving the sign with a big smile, which surprises her even more. It's then we notice she's actually part monster. Sure, all monster hunters are half monsters, but her transformation is way more pronounced, nearly taking over half her body. Being a girl, she instinctively tries to cover the transformed side out of embarrassment. Panic sets in as she realizes this means Junho must have known she was watching him the whole time. She worries he might think she's some kind of freak and even call the cops on her. Still feeling flustered, she peeks through her sniper one last time, and to her surprise she sees both Garf and Lucia genuinely happy for her, grateful that she saved Junho's life. Just then someone walks into the room she's in, which is basically on the roof. The man calls her Kapar and asks what she's doing up there since she usually just passes by. Feeling anxious, she stammers that she was hunting. The man assumes she's after some kind of monster when he presses her about what kind of monster it was and where she shot it. Kapar's heart races because the monster she's really talking about is none other than the legendary monster hunter Balder. When she sheepishly admits that she accidentally shot Balder, the guy is left utterly stunned. Kapar starts to freak out, and as she apologizes, the man says he'll have to report this to the city lord, who turns out to be Claude, and guess what? Claude is actually Copper's dad. In a panic, she desperately pleads with the man not to tell her father. In that moment of chaos, she inadvertently reveals her monster transformation, making her feel even more awkward as she tries to cover herself up. She tells the man to just do what he needs to do, and as he leaves, Copper finds herself leaping onto her bed. She digs into a food wrap hidden in her clothes to pull out some eggs. This is actually a treat from Junho. It's kinda sweet how he named his restaurant the Father and Daughter Tavern. Kapar then starts to wonder what Junho really thinks of her. Even though she's a regular at his place, she always sends someone else to pick up her food. Deep down, Kapar worries that Junho sees her as some sort of weirdo, but remembering how he thanked her makes her blush as she hopes he doesn't hate her. Meanwhile, let's check back in with Junho, who's deep in thought about everything that just went down. He's finally met Balder, the most powerful character from his wife's novel. Just like in the story, Balder showed up right on cue. Then out of nowhere, the sharp-tongued monster made an appearance, which pretty much confirms the whispers that Balder is indeed part of the original plot. But here's the catch. All of this was supposed to unfold much later in the book. Junho starts to panic, wondering if he's thrown the whole storyline off course, and more importantly, he realizes that his little girl almost lost her dad because he nearly met his end. Junho was in a bit of a panic, realizing just how lucky he was to have made friends with Kapar. In the story, she was known as the one-hit kill assassin, but she wasn't supposed to show up this early in the plot. He thought about how if he hadn't randomly bumped into one of the guards and made a good impression, he'd probably be dead by now. It turns out Junho had been quietly preparing for this moment, like when he gave one of the guards at Kapar's mansion some food as a friendly gesture. But really, this was all part of his clever plan to befriend her. Getting serious, Junho knew he couldn't just sit back and let things unfold. If he was going to dive into this world and interact with its characters, he needed to take action. He figured that just being friendly and acting like he belonged wouldn't cut it. With the sketch of Kapar in hand, he realized that since Balder had already shown up at a time that didn't match the original story, he couldn't rely on the plot anymore. So he decided that the best course of action was to recruit all the major characters in the novel and keep them close. The next day, Kapar was really trying hard to resist the urge to spy on Junho with her sniper rifle. She couldn't help but be curious about what he was up to. Peering through her scope, she spotted him chatting with some local business owners. Kapar thought to herself that Junho was quite the hard worker. Watching him connect with the locals so easily made her wonder how he managed to get along so well, especially with people he didn't know. In reality, since Kapar was a bit shy and her monster transformation had taken over most of her body, these were things she could only dream of doing. But then she was taken aback when she saw Junho heading straight toward her house. She couldn't shake off the curiosity about what was happening. What really left her stunned was watching Junho walk right inside without a single guard stopping him. Kapar was completely baffled. After all, her dad was the lord of the city and their home was always under tight security, almost like a police station. So for someone to just stroll in was downright unsettling. Before she could even wrap her head around it, Junho was already at her door, making her even more anxious. As they settled down to chat, Junho introduced himself as the owner of the Father and Daughter Tavern, the very place Kapar had helped out just the day before. But being the shy girl she was, even a little interaction with Ah Young made her jumpy. Junho lifted his adorable daughter toward Kapar, mentioning that his little girl remembers her savior, which is why she was so playful around Kapar. Meanwhile, Kapar, still trying to conceal the changes in her body, simply asked Junho how he managed to get into their house, considering there were supposed to be guards at the gate. That's when Junho explained that those guards were regulars at his tavern, and when he told them he wanted to meet Kapar, they let him in without a second thought. This really highlighted how well Junho was accepted in this world, especially among the monster hunters. He also mentioned that when he told the guards he wanted to thank Kapar for her efforts in protecting the city from monsters, everyone including the guards was thrilled. Essentially, Kapar's transformation into a monster gave her some unique perks, allowing her to spot threats from a distance. She had become like a watchtower for the city, identifying monsters before they could even enter and taking them down with her sniper. But when she heard Junho praising her, she blushed so hard that she ended up covering her entire face in embarrassment. Junho, knowing exactly what to do, tells her he brought her a little something special. And what's the surprise? Food. I'm not entirely sure if they're boiled eggs or something else entirely, but Junho explains that since Copper usually orders a ton of them, they must be her favorite. The moment she sees it, Copper lights up with joy, completely forgetting her earlier embarrassment. She loves the food so much that she's practically drooling. Junho mentions he brought her a whole bunch and encourages her to dig in. As she takes a bite, she expresses her gratitude, saying she really appreciates it since she couldn't keep asking the guards to fetch her some every time. Junho can't help but smile. Well, it's more of a smirk. Really, it's clear he's won Kapar over. Then he casually mentions he has a small favor to ask her. We don't get to hear what it is, but judging by his happy demeanor, it must have gone well. As they leave looking up at Kapar's tower, we notice a new flag has been added. Upon closer inspection, it's the flag of the Father and Daughter Tavern. Essentially, Junho is promoting his new delivery service. He's on the lookout for strong monster hunters who can deliver goods and food. Even in this new world, he still has a passion for his delivery job. He explains that this gives him a free advertisement for his shop, showcasing his delivery service. The plan is to use this service as a way to connect with powerful characters from the story, eventually recruiting them to help protect his little girl. Kapar waved at Junho with a bright smile, almost as if she was fishing for compliments about her work. But Junho couldn't help but let out a sigh. The flag advertising their event was hanging upside down. The tower where the flag was displayed was so tall that even folks outside the city could spot it. Balder was the first to catch sight of it from a distance, but with the sign being upside down, he couldn't make heads or tails of it. A cute girl with white hair also noticed the flag, and after tilting her head in confusion, all she could decipher was that monster hunters were welcome at the Father and Daughter Tavern. The next day, Junho's restaurant was buzzing with customers. Garf was busy juggling his usual waiter duties while Lucy was being her playful self, goofing around with the patrons and even getting into a playful Tom and Jerry-style tussle with them. I just adore the chubby versions. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Junho was swamped trying to whip up multiple dishes at once, and he was definitely not enjoying it. He felt like he was losing his mind, working tirelessly while the profits just didn't seem to add up. Before long, it was break time. And as everyone, Junho, his little girl Garf, and even Lucy took a well-deserved breather, Junho couldn't help but call out to Lucy, reminding her it was high time she started pulling her weight and earning some cash. Lucy, who was her usual tipsy self, chimed in that she had brought in some money from monster hunting. Junho, a bit irritated, pointed out that was ages ago, like 6 months back. Seeing him getting riled up, Lucy agreed to go make some money, playfully suggesting that he just tell her where the next monster was, and she'd take care of it in no time. It's amusing how they're using Junho's monster knowledge like a GPS to track them down. This got Junho thinking. Reports of monsters popping up regularly were still coming in. He figured it wasn't really Lucy's fault. What he needed to do now was recall the next part of the story so he could give her a hint. All he could remember was the ominous phrase about the cruel ones coming. Junho realized that the main issue was that even in the story, monsters just kept appearing without any clear reason for their existence or origin. He reassured himself that at least sticking to the original plot had gotten him this far. But now that the whole narrative was a jumbled mess, he had no idea what was coming next, which was pretty unsettling. Just when he was deep in thought, there was a knock at the door. He turned to send whoever it was away since they were closed for the day, but to his surprise, it was the same white-haired girl from earlier. There's something about Junho's smile that gives me the creeps. Maybe I'm still haunted by that grinning monster from before. Anyway, the girl introduces herself as Tirna Hosen Marduna, the first daughter of House Tirna. She's actually pretty cute. Junho, however, is left in shock, wondering why a noble like her would show up at his place. Acting all noble, she calls him an errand boy. Honestly, given how Junho is dressed, I can't really blame her for that. He quickly corrects her, saying he's actually the owner, which leaves her completely taken aback. Junho can't shake the feeling that he's never seen a character like her in the novel at all. He even wonders if she mistook his tavern for some kind of fixer agency. Anyway, getting back to her playful side, she asks if this is really where someone can request a monster hunter, but Junho isn't having any of it. He tells her they do deliveries and aren't fixers, adding that they're closed for now so she should come back if she wants to eat. After being brushed off like that, the girl insists they should take her request and promises to pay generously. Junho tries to explain that they don't take jobs for the money, but Lucia, sensing a golden opportunity, nudges him to consider the request. Junho pointed out that requests from nobles can be a bit tricky, and he wasn't wrong. Nobles are the type who might even ask Junho to sell them his little girl. Even Lucia agreed, noting that nobles always seem to ask for the most annoying things. But then there's Marduna, the white-haired girl who overheard everything and chimed in that she'd be paying with her family's priceless treasure. This took both Lucia and Junho by surprise. Naturally, the mention of priceless treasure made them reconsider, and Junho asked Lucia to confirm if Marduna was being truthful, which Lucia did. A little later, they all settled down for a chat, and Marduna revealed that her request was to find her friend. She explained that her friend is a commoner around her age who used to come to their estate to sell goods. Junho asked if she knew his name or where he lived. Marduna, feeling a bit shy, admitted that her friend's name is Hans, but she didn't know where he lived. Lucy pointed out that this made the request quite challenging, since there are tons of people in the city named Hans. Marduna apologized for not having more details, but Lucy, knowing she had a solid way to track down this Hans guy, decided to play along. She told Marduna that they could still find her friend, which surprised her. But then Lucy leaned in closer, insisting that before they proceed, Marduna should show them this priceless treasure she mentioned to really get them motivated. Marduna, feeling the pressure, tried to explain that she had already said she would only give it to them after the job was done. But Lucy, channeling some serious Lloyd vibes, grabs Marduna's shoulders and starts guilt-tripping her, saying her friend might be out there trembling, hurt, or even freezing in the cold, which really tugs at Marduna's heartstrings. Seizing the moment, she pulls out a contract, not even giving Marduna a chance to read it. Lucy just urges her to sign it. Marduna starts to panic right away, recalling her dad's advice never to stamp anything without reading or thinking it through. But Lucy, determined, grabs her hand and tries to make her stamp the contract, which is honestly pretty hilarious. Marduna's cute struggle to resist is just too much. Even Garf chimes in, telling Junho to put a stop to Lucy's antics because it's getting out of hand, but Junho just covers Garf's mouth, clearly enjoying the chaos. But on a serious note, this was a necessary tactic when dealing with nobles. In the end, Marduna reluctantly stamps the contract. After that, Junho decided to close up shop for the day, leaving a sign that read they were closed for personal reasons. The scene shifts to Marduna's home, which is an old, crumbling mansion, giving off the vibe of a once great noble house that has seen better days. Inside, it was just as messy, looking like it hadn't been cleaned in ages. Junho and the gang were pretty let down. They had trekked all day just to arrive and were greeted with nothing more than a cup of water in a chipped cup. Garf couldn't hold back his concerns any longer. He turned to Lucia and asked what was going on. Marduna was a noble, yet somehow she couldn't even afford a carriage to bring them up the mountain. Garf even questioned whether the so-called priceless treasure was real. Lucia, feeling frustrated, explained that according to her ability, Marduna wasn't lying about the treasure. But as they bickered back and forth, the treasure was finally revealed, and it turned out to be a creepy-looking pouch that seemed to be made from human skin. Just looking at the scene, Junho, Lucia, and Garf were all taken aback, with Lucia voicing her unease right from the start. They turned their focus to the timid Marduna, who was already in tears. Lucia attempted to empty the pouch, hoping to find something inside, but it was completely empty. Disappointed, she touched her head and asked Marduna if she thought this was some kind of joke. She pointed out that this eerie pouch was worthless, which only made Marduna cry harder as she insisted she wasn't lying, and that this pouch was their family's most treasured possession. Lucy countered that no one would even want to buy something like that. They might be lucky to find a quirky collector with questionable taste. That's when Marduna's feelings were really hurt, and she asked if that meant they wouldn't help her find her friend Hans. Lucy simply handed the pouch to Junho, suggesting they move on since this felt like a waste of time. But Junho, being the caring and understanding dad he is, couldn't ignore Marduna's sadness. He stood up and walked over to her. Lucy reminded him that even though he's a nice guy, taking on a request like this wasn't wise. But Junho replied that Marduna was clearly upset and desperate to find her friend, plus little Ah Young had taken a shine to her. Adorable little Ah Young reached out to Marduna, trying to comfort her, which made Marduna smile as she promised not to cry anymore. I really love this series. Meanwhile, Junho, still holding the pouch, said they could find a buyer if they looked hard enough. Just then, something tumbled out of the creepy pouch, a cup of noodles just like the ones you'd find in a 7-Eleven in Japan. Staring at the cup of noodles, Junho was left in disbelief, wondering how something from Earth ended up there, and just like that, he had stumbled upon another perk from this other world. Garf and Lucy stared at the cup of noodles, completely baffled by what they were looking at. Meanwhile, Junho couldn't help but voice his confusion, wondering aloud how something like this ended up in front of them. This prompted both Garf and Lucy to pounce on him, urging him to hurry up and pull something else out. But instead, Junho turned to Marduna, asking her how this all came to be. Marduna shared that she had once overheard a conversation about the pouch, but she never thought it was real. When Junho pressed her for details, she explained that it was said if someone blessed by a foreign god grabs the pouch, it would give them something they've touched before, aligning with their true desires. So if Junho were to grab the pouch and think of his truck, it could magically appear, which would be pretty amazing. Junho was left in disbelief as he couldn't recall any item like this from the original novel. But Lucia, hearing this, immediately jumped at Marduna, asking if that meant the pouch could conjure up silver coins. This girl really had a thing for money. Knowing the pouch's potential value, Junho assured Marduna that they would help her find her friend, which made her beam with happiness. As Lucia began her ritual, she was still daydreaming about how silver coins would shower down on her once she completed the task. In front of her sat a clay doll, and everyone was curious about what she planned to do with it. Luxie turned to Junho and asked if he understood how her ability worked. Junho nodded, explaining that Luxie could see truths and lies represented as colors. Luxie agreed, adding that it takes time for her to determine whether the answers she receives are genuine. However, if they could create a target to ask anything, it would completely change the game. Junho chimed in, saying this approach would let them discern truth from lies without needing to ask directly. Can you even grasp how powerful this ability is? I mean, she could literally make a clay doll and ask it for the cure to cancer, and that doll would have no choice but to tell her the truth. It's like walking the fine line between truth and deception. But Garf reminded them that using this ability takes a serious toll on Lucy's body. If it gets any worse, it could speed up her transformation into a monster, which is a real concern since this technique pushes her monster form to its limits. Her claws emerge and her ears shift as she commands the clay doll to obey her and answer all her questions. As she gives the command, the doll reacts, eyes popping into existence as it gains consciousness. Lucy starts with her first question, asking the doll if a boy named Hans has ever been in the house they're in. The doll confirms it. Then she moves on to her second question, asking if Hans is truly Marduna's friend, and again the doll confirms. Next she inquires if Hans is far from where they are now, to which the doll replies no. Finally she asks if Hans is still alive, but this time the doll falls silent. Feeling anxious, Lucy presses the doll for an answer. Is Hans still alive? After a moment, the doll finally responds with a yes. But the color of the words is foreboding, making Lucy realize that something is off. She quickly reaches for her gun. Junho, noticing her sudden shift, asked what was wrong, but Lucy, now all business, shot back with one last question for the doll. Had Hans turned into a monster, and was he right there with them? The doll's laughter echoed menacingly as it confirmed the truth. Hans was indeed there. In a panic, Lucy turned to Garf and Junho, urgently instructing them to shut the door. But before they could react, the monster burst through the wall, lunging at Lucy. Luckily, Garf was quicker. He dashed in front of her, intercepting the attack just in time. Marduna, witnessing this chaos, was struck with horror as she heard Hans's voice calling out to her. His body had morphed into a grotesque monster, and seeing him like that shattered her heart. As the creature consumed Hans entirely, even striking him and telling him to be quiet, Marduna was paralyzed with fear. Finally, the monster revealed itself, a grotesque figure with a human face and a spider's body, its visage reminiscent of an old man. It began to toy with Marduna's feelings, accusing her of being responsible for all of this. Mistaking the creature's words for Hansi's, she could only weep as she called out to him. Realizing the situation was spiraling out of control, Lucy turned to Marduna for guidance. Once someone transforms into a monster like that, the only option left is to kill them. The monster, overhearing this, became even more deranged, baring its teeth in fury and blaming Marduna for everything. Every dream and future she had promised Hans was now just a cruel joke. Hearing this, especially knowing that her friend had ended up in this mess because of her, Marduna felt utterly crushed, just like before with that creepy monster. This one opened its mouth, ready to devour Marduna, who was already emotionally shattered. But then Junho sprang into action, pulling out a can of pesticide from his pouch and spraying it at the spider monster. To everyone's surprise, it actually worked. The monster's skin began to sizzle, and it screamed in agony, rolling around on the ground. Lucy and Garf were completely baffled by Junho's actions. He stepped forward, urging Marduna not to listen to the monster. He explained that creatures like this always spew nonsense, exploiting the kindness of others while shifting the blame onto everyone else. Wiping her tears, Marduna turned to Junho and the others, pleading for them to save her friend. Junho smiled reassuringly, but as he turned around he noticed Garf and Lucy already springing into action. Luxia yelled at him to toss the tin can he had used on the monster earlier, the pesticide. Without hesitation, Junho got ready to throw it, reminding them to be careful and catch it properly. As he launched it, Garf didn't wait for it to hit the ground. He sent the pesticide soaring toward Luxia. The can was just inches away from the monster's head, catching it off guard as none of them really understood what was happening. But Lucia, looking as cool as ever, grabbed her gun and aimed it at the pesticide. She complimented Junho for pulling out such mysterious items from his pouch. However, in that moment Junho suddenly remembered that pesticides are flammable. He shouted at Lucia to stop, but it was too late. She had already pulled the trigger. Junho quickly grabbed Marduna and little Ahyung, taking cover just as a massive explosion erupted, mere inches from Marduna's house. In the aftermath, the explosion had taken down the monster, but it also caused some serious damage to Marduna's home. As always happens, just before these creatures meet their end, they start spewing out some pretty unsettling stuff. I couldn't quite figure out who the monster was referring to, but it kept cursing and repeating a haunting line about wishing it had never given birth to this child. Could it be talking about a young? That thought really set Junho off. As the monster lamented the existence of the child, Garf wasted no time and crushed its head in a heartbeat. The fury in Garf's actions hinted at something deeper in his past. Even Lucia, Garf's master, could sense the weight of it all as she watched him relentlessly smash the monster's head until there was nothing left. Marduna stepped forward, tears streaming down her face as she took in the sight of her friend's anguish. Hands reached out, taking Marduna's hands in his and offering her some glowing crystals that resembled tears. It was a heart-wrenching moment, with Marduna sobbing while Hans managed a bittersweet smile, bidding farewell to his friend. He expressed his gratitude for her search, and in her arms he slipped away, leaving Marduna in tears. Not long after, it was time to say farewell. With their mission accomplished, Junho and the others were getting ready to head back. Marduna expressed her gratitude for their help in locating her friend. Junho, noticing her surprise, asked if she had a place to stay, which caught her off guard. Marduna is one of those characters who just radiate innocence and charm. Even Lucy and Garf started whispering, pointing out how much she resembled Junho in her naivety, which made him blush. Junho extended his hand, inviting Marduna to join them and work at the tavern. However, still blusing, she politely declined, mentioning that she had a place to stay, gesturing toward her mansion. But in that moment, she was left in shock as she watched the entire house crumble right before her eyes. Honestly, it was a miracle that the house had held up for so long. A few days later, Junho officially changed the sign of his restaurant to reflect that it was now the Father-Daughter Tavern. Monster hunters were welcome, but no tabs were allowed, and customers could even be served by a noble. Marduna had officially joined Junho's team as a waitress, and the customers adored her, working the poor girl to the bone. They could hear her scurrying around, but given her cuteness, they just couldn't resist teasing her. Even Lasha got in on the fun, prompting Marduna to shout that she was a noble. I absolutely loved this scene, especially little Ah Young, who was just chilling behind Marduna, going with the flow. The customers couldn't help but laugh at how cute Marduna and Ah Young looked when they got flustered, saying that this was exactly why they came to the restaurant every day. And honestly, they weren't wrong. Marduna is just too adorable. Anyway, Lucia's mood does a complete 180 when she spots Balder sitting across from her. She shoots him a glare, demanding to know what he's doing in the restaurant, aside from ruining her day, but it turns out Balder is completely captivated by Ah Young's cuteness, staring at her the whole time. Marduna, noticing this, quickly asks why Baldur isn't eating his meal since the noodles are getting soggy, but Baldur doesn't even respond. He just keeps his gaze fixed on little Ah Young. Marduna, feeling a bit anxious, wonders if there's something wrong with the food, but once again Baldur stays silent, making Marduna start to panic. Just then, Ah Young reaches out to Baldur as if she wants to play, and for the first time Baldur cracks a small smile as she playfully extends her hand. Marduna, seeing this, hands the adorable Ah Young over to Baldur, almost like she's dangling a fish in front of him. On the flip side, Lucia's not pleased at all. She can't help but grumble about why Baldur has been hanging around the restaurant so much lately. Garf points out that Baldur has been coming for a whole week, so what's with all the hate from Lucia? After all, Baldur is a hunter just like them, and Garf can't wrap his head around why Lucia seems to despise him so much. Lucia explains that, to put it simply, Baldur is the worst teacher she's ever had. Not only that, but he's also the worst dad and a terrible ex-boyfriend. Garf, understandably confused, thinks it's wild to hear dad and boyfriend in the same breath. Lucy clarifies that Baldur is more like her guardian since he took her in when she was just a kid and raised her. They lived together, bathed together, and he was the one who taught her how to hunt monsters. Yeah, this is getting a bit creepy, folks. Even Garf thinks this is all kinds of strange. Ex-boyfriend, shared baths, living together, it just doesn't add up. To make matters even more confusing, Garf asks how old Baldur really is, and Lucia admits she has no clue since he looks exactly the same as he did when she was a child. Out of nowhere, Lucia grabs Garf's face and insists he should really take this to heart. She tells him she's sharing this because she knows he'll find a partner someday, but he must never treat them poorly. Hurting someone with a tender heart can leave scars that last a lifetime. It's a stark reminder of when Baldur first showed up and called Lucia the child who devoured her own brother. Maybe that's why Lucia has a bit of an edge. Anyway, Garf is left there, cheeks flushed and completely baffled. Just then, Marduna bursts in, startling him with a shout about a major problem. Garf is taken aback as Marduna explains that there are 10 customers each ordering something different, and she's only got 2 hands to manage it all. This girl really knows how to be adorable. Even little Ah Hyung is mimicking her. Hearing this, Garf clenches his fists and yells, asking when Junho will be back. They dive into a frantic rush to prepare the food, both doing their best to keep up. Meanwhile, they hand baby Ah Young over to Baldur, who's just standing there, completely bewildered by the chaos. Lu Sha, watching Garf and Marduna scramble to run the restaurant, can't help but wonder what Junho is up to. I mean, she could pitch in instead of just sipping her drink. Anyway, we find out that Junho has locked himself away in a room for an entire week. Inside, he's trying to piece together the mystery of the cruel ones are coming. He's basically going over the events of the novel in his mind. A week ago, he was experimenting with this creepy pouch. Let's just call it the gate pouch. He recalls Marduna saying that the gate pouch allows someone blessed by foreign gods to grab hold of things they truly need or desire, no matter the distance, as long as they've touched it before. So Junho shuts his eyes and imagines his home back in the real world. He visualizes his bedroom, where the original novel has always sat on his table, and reaches into the gate pouch. He actually pulls the novel out. It turns out the novel is titled The Cruel Ones Are Coming, and now that he has it in his hands, Junho feels he can prepare himself better. But after a few days, he's starting to lose his grip on reality. He mentions that he's read the book over 10 times, yet he still can't pinpoint a clear solution. Each time he revisits the story, he realizes just how profound his wife's writing truly is. It's so intricate that it brings back memories of her while she was crafting it, and he can't help but remember how joyful she seemed. Junho summarizes the plot of his wife's novel. Essentially, this world was shaped by the parent gods and their daughter Miriam. However, Miriam fell for a human, a creation of the parent gods, which set off a chain reaction of chaos. In her rebellion against her parents, she inadvertently attracted an outer god, leading to the invasion of monsters from that realm, marking the beginning of destruction. At first glance, it's evident that the foolish father who embodies the final boss is the true villain, and the protagonist Garf is meant to defeat him. Yet, in this bleak world, Garf endures endless suffering, ultimately breaking down and becoming the greatest victim of all. The story culminates in an unending tragedy, showcasing Garf's desperate quest for revenge after losing Lucia and finding himself utterly alone. In the novel, right from the get-go, Lucia was destined to meet her end at the hands of the clapping dog monster. This left Garf burning with a desire for revenge against the creatures that took his master. In his obsession, he crossed a line by consuming monster meat to fuel his quest for vengeance, which ultimately drove him to madness. Rather than saving people as a monster hunter should, he became fixated solely on exterminating monsters, resulting in countless citizens getting hurt or even killed. As a consequence, all the city's monster hunters, including Baldur and Kafar, turned their backs on him. Junho points out that this was the only way things could have played out. Baldur likely began to see Garf as a monster himself, while Kafar, being a public official responsible for the city's safety, couldn't let such a reckless monster hunter roam free. Despite his relentless killing spree against monsters, Garf was unable to prevent the city's downfall. Tragically, every monster hunter who was meant to be the city's savior ended up meeting their demise, each for their own personal reasons. Kapar transformed completely into a monster, while Baldur was brutally beaten to death by humans. Given Baldur's near immortality, they resorted to smashing his head in and tossing his body into the river. To make matters worse, all the monster hunters faced brutal ends at the hands of humans, leaving Garf as the last one standing. Yet he spent most of his days at Lucia's grave, consumed by a profound emptiness, ultimately deciding to abandon the fight. Consequently, the eastern part of the city was utterly devastated, coinciding with the mysterious disappearance of Junho's wife and the abrupt end of the novel's serialization. Junho reflects on how intense all of this is, realizing that he's the only one left who can prevent such a future from unfolding. Right now, the novel is in its final arc, and Junho reveals that there's just a year and a half left until the apocalypse hits. According to the story, this catastrophic event will see named monsters emerging in the area between the city and its outer wall, resulting in a complete breakdown of communication between cities, and the fortress wall will become increasingly harder to defend. The number of monsters appearing within the city will also rise steadily. However, there's one thing Junho can't quite wrap his head around: the behavior of the monsters. He believes the story clearly shows them as coming from outside, and it's been established that they're invading under the orders of that foolish father mentioned earlier. Yet, since these monsters keep appearing inside the city, it suggests they must have had the ability to infiltrate from the very beginning, which just doesn't add up. And why is the city's destruction predicted to happen in a year and a half? If the monsters truly have a way to spawn within the city, they could charge in at any moment. Junho wonders if the day of the apocalypse holds any special significance, as it marks the day the monsters launch their attack. If their goal is to wipe out humanity, then the most effective strategy would be to maintain a relentless assault to wear down the humans. These were the questions that puzzled Junho. He started to think that maybe he should just rally all the monster hunters and go after the monsters himself, using the knowledge he had. It sounded good in theory, but he quickly dismissed the idea, realizing it could throw the entire story off course if he meddled too much, and that wouldn't be a good thing. After spending an entire week mulling over this, Junho figured it was time for a break. He decided to pull something out of the gate pouch and go see his little girl. And is it just me, or was this pouch actually smiling? It seemed like it is developing a personality the more he used it. When he opened the door, he was greeted by the whole crew: Marduna, Garf, and Luce waiting for him. Holding a bottle of baby milk, he apologized for taking so long. Garf and Marduna immediately chimed in, expressing their relief that they hadn't collapsed under the workload, which made sense since they had been juggling Junho's responsibilities along with their usual waiter tasks, all while keeping an eye on baby Aryung. Luce, ever the playful one, latched onto Junho's leg and asked if he was absolutely sure that silver coins couldn't be pulled from the gate pouch. This woman has a serious love for money. Junho explained that while he couldn't pull out silver coins, he had figured out a way to earn them using the gate pouch in the meantime. As soon as they heard this, both Garf and Luce lit up with excitement. Eager to know if Junho had stumbled upon something significant, Luce was practically glowing at the thought. Anyway, Junho turned his focus to his little girl, who was still being held by Baldur. Seeing how well she was getting along with Baldur, no tears, just happily sucking on her little baby sucker, Junho couldn't help but ask Baldur if he'd consider teaming up with him to create a world where his little girl could live in peace and grow up happy. Baldur looked a bit taken aback, remarking that Junho is quite the peculiar fellow. He possesses an astonishing amount of knowledge, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. However, when Lucy hears that Junho wants to collaborate with Baldur, she immediately gets upset before she can completely lose her temper. Garf steps in, having anticipated her reaction, and tries to calm things down by telling Junho that Lucy and Baldur aren't exactly the best match. But it's too late. Lucy shoves him aside, already reaching for her gun, threatening to wreak havoc if Junho goes through with working with Baldur. I just adore these charming moments. The artist behind this story often sneaks in little details. Take Marduna, for instance. What's she doing peeking out from behind Junho? Yet Junho just smiles, declaring that he will rewrite the ending of this story no matter what. And this is where we'll pause Junho's journey for today. I'm curious how many of you actually enjoyed this story, so if you made it to the end, if you loved this recap, hit that like button and subscribe for the next chapter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next world.